This all happened around 15 years ago, so bear with me if some of the details are a bit fuzzy. It was near the end of my junior year, maybe March or April, when I received the first letter. I don't remember every word, but it was your typical secret admirer stuff. Things like, "I've had a crush on you since the first time I saw you, and I've never had the courage to tell you." At the time, I felt flattered. I wasn't used to attention, let alone someone having a crush on me. I'd read the letter over and over again at night, smiling to myself, wondering who could have written it. Then more letters started showing up, first a few per week, then nearly every day. I'd find them in my locker, under my desk, sometimes even stuffed in the pocket of my backpack. I didn't think much of how this person could possibly know where all my classes were. I was too caught up in the excitement and attention. Eventually, one letter said he wanted to meet. It gave a time and a location, said he was finally ready to reveal himself. I was thrilled. I imagined some cute movie moment, so I spent a lot of time getting ready, fixing my hair, doing my makeup, all to meet a total stranger behind the bleachers. School ended, and I made my way out to the field. Everyone else had gone home, so it was pretty empty. Then I saw someone approaching the bleachers. He walked with an odd stiffness, constantly glancing behind him like he thought someone was watching. He wore a gray hoodie pulled up so I couldn't see his face, and the moment I laid eyes on him, my stomach turned. Something about it felt wrong. I didn't wait around. I turned around and walked as fast as I could to the nearest bus stop. After that, the letters started changing. They became more specific, more personal. He'd comment on what I wore, how I looked that day, whether he liked my hair a certain way. Eventually, the tone shifted. He started getting upset that I wasn't responding, saying I was ignoring him. One letter even said he might come to my house. And honestly, I believed he could. Even though the letters scared me, I still read every one. Some strange part of me felt comforted by the attention, even if deep down I knew it was anything but normal. By late May, another note arrived asking me to meet again. This time, it was at a gas station off the highway. It wasn't that odd a suggestion. Our town in New Jersey was tiny and didn't even have a mall. People met in strange places all the time. So I went. I didn't think too hard about it until I was already driving. It started to feel wrong the farther I went. I kept telling myself, just a few more minutes before I'd turn back. I must have driven nearly half an hour into the woods before I finally arrived. But this place wasn't just out of the way, it was deserted. The windows were broken, weeds growing up through cracks, trash everywhere. It looked like nobody had been there in years. And there, standing by the entrance, was a man in a gray hoodie. He had one hand deep in his pocket. I don't know what he was holding, but I didn't stick around to find out. It took a moment for my brain to snap into gear, but once it did, I floored it. I must have hit 90 on those winding roads just trying to get away from there. That summer, my family ended up moving. Eventually, I put the whole thing behind me. I stopped thinking about it altogether, until one day a friend from back home sent me a link to a local article. It was about a girl. She had been found dead behind an abandoned gas station. I still think about how that could have been me. I don't know why I was so slow to act that night, but I thank my instincts every time I think about what almost happened. Back in 2023, I had just swung by my parents' house to grab some mail when I got a message from a guy I used to be sort of friends with. Let's call him Mark. He'd been pestering me for months to hang out. There'd been sketchy stuff with him before, some involving heavy drugs and times where it felt like he was trying to hook up with me under false pretenses. But those are different stories, so I wasn't exactly eager to hang out with him. Still, since I was already nearby and figured it might get him to leave me alone, I reluctantly agreed. I texted him when I arrived, and he came out to open the gate. We went up 3 flights of stairs and a few doors down the hall to his place on the left. Mark was only about 5 feet 3 inches, shorter than me even without heels, but he had a lot of issues. His apartment, although in a low-income building, was surprisingly tidy and well-kept. When you entered, the kitchen was to the left, C-shaped with a marble-style counter and sink facing into the living room. The living area had a couch, TV, and then to the right was the bathroom and a bedroom he shared with a roommate. More on him later. We sat on the couch chatting, and Mark quickly shifted to ranting about said roommate, calling him lazy, needy, clingy. Said the guy wanted more from their relationship, like cuddling and romance, but Mark was only in it for fun. He also complained about driving the guy to work all the time, because the roommate always missed the bus, though some of the details were kind of jumbled. At some point, He started texting and calling the roommate, but the guy wasn't answering, which seemed to set him off even more. As his mood spiraled, he got louder, pacing, slamming things in the kitchen, and yelling that he wanted to break his roommate's stuff, maybe even hurt him. Possibly worse. I have anxiety, especially around shouting or aggression, so I froze. I tried to remain calm, de-escalate from the couch, anything to avoid becoming a target myself. Then he went into the bathroom and started smashing things, finally breaking what looked like a glass bottle of mouthwash. He came out screaming, hand bleeding. He'd cut himself badly. Blood was dripping onto the floor, and he kept yelling, totally out of control. I got up to help, managing to calm him down just enough to check his hand. It was deep, no band-aid was fixing that. I asked where his first aid kit was, already knowing he'd need stitches. Found it while avoiding all the broken stuff littering the kitchen and bathroom. I focused on cleaning and dressing the wound enough to hold until someone else arrived. As I was rinsing his cut at the sink with warm water, he winced and pulled away. Frustrated and nervous, I blurted, "If you're going to act like a child, I can't help you." That was a mistake. His mood flipped again. He yelled, got in my face, full of rage. I was backed into the living room, heart racing, searching my bag until my fingers found the knife I always carried. Just in case. The look in his eyes, the way he shouted, it was just like my abusive ex during his worst moments. Mark knew about my trauma. I had told him once in confidence. So when I whispered, "You look just like he did that night," it wasn't just fear, it was a memory crashing into the present. And his face shifted. That cold, dangerous look returned, and I wanted to disappear. He stalked forward, taunting me. I repeated over and over that I just wanted to leave. He finally walked to the door, yanked it open, and barked at me to get out. I stepped into the hall, and he stayed inches behind me. On the way to the stairs, I begged him to stay back. I was terrified he might shove me. Instead, he leaned close and muttered, "If I wanted to kill you, I would." That sent ice through my chest. I bolted down the stairs and out the gate. He stood watching from the doorway the whole time. Once I reached my car, I jumped in and locked the doors, only to realize I'd dropped my keys. My heart dropped. It felt like a horror movie moment, frantically digging through my things, sobbing, panicking. I had to get out and check around the car, only to find the keys had slipped under my seat the whole time. By now, I was a mess, shaking, crying. I pulled away as fast as I could, and as I looked up at the building, I could swear I saw Mark with another person watching from the balcony. He had been to my house twice before, so he knew where I lived. That thought alone made my skin crawl. When I finally made it home, I sent him one last message, called him a monster, told him never to contact me again. Then I blocked him. He tried a couple times to reach out through other accounts, but I didn't respond. I wasn't going back into that nightmare. It was a hot summer day. I had gone hiking and gotten seriously lost, but that's another story. After trekking through pathless woods for miles, I finally stumbled onto a road. I didn't even know which way to walk. I was exhausted and still miles from my car. Eventually, I made it back and was driving home, drained and sunburned. My house is about 15 miles from the trailhead, tucked deep in the countryside. As I drove, I saw someone hitchhiking. He looked tired and out of shape, sweating in the summer heat. Having just gone through my own ordeal, I sympathized and pulled over to give him a lift. I didn't realize that my day's challenges weren't over yet. He opened the door and climbed in. We exchanged a quick greeting, and I noted he had a prosthetic arm, made of heavy plastic with a metal hook at the end. He told me he was a former heavy equipment operator, now unemployed. His home was going through a foreclosure, and he was sticking around during the evenings to avoid being removed. A rough patch, clearly, but I didn't think much of it. To pass the time, I shared a couple of stories. He listened, and then offered one of his own. According to him, during a historic blizzard years ago, a woman had a bad car accident outside his house. The road was impassable, so he loaded her into his backhoe and drove 30 miles through the storm to a hospital, saving her life. It was a strange tale. Something about it felt off. I've seen a lot in life, and I sensed he wasn't telling the full truth. Maybe some parts were exaggerated, or maybe he'd changed some details. Still, I let it go. Our ride was nearly over. We reached his driveway just as he finished the story. But then things got weird. He started making strange, overly friendly comments. I tried to laugh it off and politely ended the chat. But he kept talking. Then he paused and looked straight at me, his prosthetic arm halfway raised, not saying a word, just staring. It was clear he wasn't planning to get out of the car. I stayed calm. I've dealt with stress before and know how to read a situation. If he made a move, I'd act fast. I kept his eyes locked with mine, showing no fear. That stare down probably told him everything he needed to know. After a long pause, he finally opened the door and got out. I reversed fast, spun the car around, and drove off. Wow, I thought. That was intense. For a moment, I debated calling the police, just to let them know about the encounter. But he hadn't actually done anything illegal, just made me uncomfortable. And it had been a long day. I told myself to forget it and head home. Looking back, that was a mistake. Almost 10 years later, I passed his house again. This time, it was cordoned off with police tape. Multiple cruisers were parked outside, along with a state crime scene van. A serious investigation was underway. I later learned a woman who had lived there had gone missing. It turned into a major case that shook the local community. I remembered the story that man had told me about the backhoe, so I called the authorities and passed the story along. A few days later, I noticed the investigation had ramped back up. I can't say for sure if what I shared helped, but it felt right to finally say something. In the end, no major charges were ever confirmed related to that case, but the couple from that property eventually faced consequences for other offenses. What I took away from the whole thing was this: if you see something that doesn't feel right, say something, even if it's just a gut feeling, and maybe think twice before picking up a stranger on the side of the road. This happened about 6 years ago. I was following my usual routine of walking around town for a few hours. I liked getting fresh air, and it was a good way to hit my step goal. I always started from my house and made a loop around town, walking a few miles out before turning back. I typically went out between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m., never later than that. But on this particular day, I had a bunch of errands to take care of. By the time I got through everything, it was already mid to late afternoon. I checked the clock. It was nearly 3 p.m. I debated whether to go out for my walk or just skip it and go tomorrow, especially since I had no plans then. But I figured I'd still have time if I shortened the route a bit, so I decided to head out. I told myself I'd just make sure to be home before dark, since it got cold fast in the evenings. I got changed, grabbed my phone, and stepped out. Almost 3 hours later, I checked the time and saw it was close to 6 p.m. The sun had dipped behind the horizon, leaving only a faint orange trace in the sky. Night was settling in quickly, and the air was getting colder. I picked up the pace. I was about 6 miles from home, so I still had a ways to go, probably over an hour of walking left. When I got within 2 miles of my house, I felt like I was nearly there. But then I passed a small convenience store and saw a guy sitting outside by the wall smoking. He looked like he was in his 30s, dressed in all black, hoodie, pants, shoes. He turned his head slowly and gave me this blank, unreadable stare. I didn't react, just kept walking like normal. A few minutes later, I turned back to glance behind me and saw he had gotten up and was now walking in the same direction. At first, I thought it might be a coincidence, but after several blocks of him not turning off anywhere, I grew uneasy. Then he started shouting. First it was a casual hey, like he was trying to get my attention. I ignored it. Then he started shouting more aggressively, words I couldn't fully catch, and then aloud, "What the fuck?" in a pissed-off voice. That's when I stopped looking back and just walked faster. I sent a quick text to my dad, telling him that a creepy guy was following me and yelling. He asked where I was, and I told him I was less than a mile from the house. He said not to worry, and that he'd come pick me up in a few minutes. I turned to check again, and unfortunately the guy was still behind me. At this point, I was about 3/4 of a mile from home. I considered running the rest of the way, but I didn't want to risk the guy figuring out where I lived. Just as I reached the corner of my street, something told me not to turn. I texted my dad again and told him I'd passed the turn and to meet me further down. He replied quickly, "Okay." I kept walking past my street when I suddenly heard rapid footsteps and what sounded like a short yell. I turned around and saw the guy had put his hood up and was sprinting right at me. I didn't stop to think, I just ran. I dashed across the street and bolted down the road. I didn't look back, just kept going as fast as I could. After what felt like forever, a pair of headlights appeared ahead. I waved my arms frantically, hoping it was my dad. Thankfully it was. I jumped in the car and told him what happened. He decided to drive around the neighborhood to look for the guy and possibly confront him. We drove up and down the area, but the streets were completely empty. No sign of anyone, no guy in black, no movement in the shadows. He was just gone. Since that night, I've stuck to walking before 2 p.m., and I always carry a pocket knife with me just in case. I still don't know what that guy's intentions were, and honestly, I hope I never find out.